still afraid.
I'm not afraid.
There wasn't a sign of life and death.
We've got to do something.
Why don't you just keep calm?
You're telling us we gotta risk our lives just because somebody might need help.
Yeah, something like that. I'll drag you out there and beat those things.
Go ahead.
Yeah, they're dead. They're all messed up.
Haven't you had enough?
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
Good evening and welcome to NIGHTCAST, the official Night of the Living Dead podcast. I'm Jim, and before we bring on our guest, tonight's guest, I had one other thing to talk about, which involves our friends at Criterion, Janus Films. It's not exactly Night of the Living Dead related, but it is Godzilla related. And I don't know if we could see this. There we go. This is the new 4K Blu-ray and UHD of Godzilla vs. Biollante. Again, it's from our friends at Criterion, same producer who produced the Night of the Living Dead Blu-ray. And inside is this great, lots of great content on the disc, but inside is this great insert that has some really neat artwork. Let's see, we could. My thing just never works. I forget the artist's name who did this, but on the back are my liner notes. I guess you could call them liner notes or essay about the film, which is over 35 years old, so I feel very old, but it was fun to do. It's a great release. Go out and get it. And also from our friends at Criterion, we've got Night of the Living Dead Blu-rays and UHD discs with this brand new, can I reach it? Yes. Brand new sticker that says a Night of the Living Dead product. So our buddies at Criterion out there supporting George Romero and Night of the Living Dead. I will put some links on screen later so you can check those two home video releases out if you don't have a Night of the Living Dead disc yet, or if you're hoping to get a Godzilla vs. Biollante disc. But anyway, let's bring on tonight's guest, which is Lawrence DeVincentz. How are you, Larry?
I'm good. Can you see me?
I could see you, but I can't. Yeah, now I can hear you. I guess everybody else could hear you as well, so that's good.
Good. I'm doing good. How are you?
Great. So how's it going? Good. So it's about time we got you on the show. We just never got around to it, but better late than way, way late, I always say. So before we get into what Larry does and his area of expertise, wanted to talk about a major loss we had in George Romero fandom, which was our friend Anthony DeLeo. Most of us know him as Tim. If you've met him, you know, he always said, "Call me Tim." And he was known for his role in Day of the Dead as Miguel. And great actor, tremendous person. If people have had the pleasure to meet him at any of the conventions, he's always very warm and friendly. But what most of the customers meeting him, most of the fans meeting Tim didn't know was he was always in a great deal of pain and uncomfortable, and just due to various health issues. And yet he always, you know, just greeted everybody warmly and tried not to let it affect him. So, Larry, you've met him many times. What do you have to say about your remembrance of Tim DeLeo?
Yeah, I have met him a bunch of times over the years. The first time I met him was in 2004 at the Horrifying Convention in Hunt Valley, Maryland. And he was always very nice and interesting, I would say. You know, I'm sure a lot of people would observe the same thing. Kind of, I can't describe it. Just interesting. You know, he had a different perspective than a lot of people. It's very arty, I would think, maybe.
Right. Like I said, he had a lot of health issues, at least for as long as I've known him, and you know, a lot of personal issues that or family issues that kept him from having I guess a much longer career in acting and so forth. So, you know, he was always dealing with that kind of stuff, and just circumstance didn't put him in the best of situations, and we've obviously lost him way too soon. And but he always spoke well of working with George and his time on the film, and of course loved the fan reception to Day of the Dead. So I wanted to do it last week, but I wasn't, or 2 weeks ago, but I wasn't prepared. So we're a little late in doing it, but let's take a few moments and just to have some silence remembering the late Anthony DeLeo.
Sure.
Okay. So, all the years I've known you, Larry, you've gone from, I guess, convention attendee to now a major staple at most of the conventions and in the George Romero research world, I guess you want to call it, right? So,
That worked.
What was the first, your first exposure to anything George Romero, whether it be Night of the Living Dead or another film?
Okay, I would say it would probably be Creepshow. I'm sure I probably saw that first because just the time frame. I don't remember which one it would have been. Would it have been Creepshow or Dawn of the Dead? I would have seen them about the same time frame. And then the third one was Night of the Living Dead.
And did you first see Creepshow or Dawn of the Dead on video, or was it in the theater when Creepshow was released?
I saw Creepshow on HBO, and then Dawn wasn't on cable really, so this would have been about 93, actually 1983 and early 84, and Dawn would have been on video. And then I also saw Night on video. I bought one of those cheapo grocery store VHS versions. It was by Congress Video. I'm sure you know the company.
Yep. And so your first exposure to Creepshow was soon after the movie was out, but on cable TV.
Yeah.
And what was the attraction to George Romero movies? What did you get out of seeing these films that made you want to delve deeper into it and eventually go to filming locations and research all of that and so forth?
Sure. Well, like I said, I had watched those movies in the early 80s, and I was about 8 years old when I saw Creepshow and Dawn for the first time. And they captured my imagination. I loved Creepshow, and I really loved Dawn. It wasn't like I was upset by the gore or zombies or anything like that. I'd already watched a lot of horror. And so none of that bothered me. I just thought it was really cool that people were in a mall and taking it over. So then, of course, I saw Dawn, and people always say, okay, there was a movie before it. It's a sequel. So you have to see that original movie, and that is Night of the Living Dead. So then I got that budget tape, and I enjoyed that. I thought it was cool. And I got one quick anecdote about that before I go further. I made the worst error ever. I did something egregious. Okay, so I said I saw that tape probably about 1984, and then about 85 or so is when they did the color version of Night. Well, what I did was I took that black and white tape and I recorded the colorized version over the black and white version. and then of course I watched
but it was the Congress, it was the Congress video version that probably cost all of like $7.99, so it doesn't really matter, right?
But then I realized the error of my ways a couple of years later. Night was played on Cinemax, and it had an intro by George Romero, and I recorded that version with the Romero intro on that same tape. So I did eventually get the black and white version back. Okay, so that's my beginning.
What about what year was the I forget what year was the that version on Cinemax? Was that like around 85 or 86?
It had to be about maybe 87 or so, or 88, because that's when I was
later. Okay.
Really getting into horror, and I realized that the colorized version wasn't what I wanted. So that's how I began to watch George Romero's films. And then later, when the internet came along, beginning of the internet, kids, one time back in the day, there were no websites, and you couldn't find things very easily. But the internet came along, and I started to look up these movies that I enjoyed, like Dawn of the Dead, Night of the Living Dead. And I saw that people had gone to some of the film locations. So I thought, I want to go to the mall from Dawn of the Dead one day. I want to go to the cemetery from Night of the Living Dead one day. And I eventually did. And then it just kept snowballing. Well, I get there, and I don't know much about these places. So then I have to research them for the next trip. And then the next trip, and the next trip. And then all of a sudden, I have all this knowledge. And then eventually it led to me doing tours for the Living Dead weekend.
And but so at some point before that, you started going to, like, outside of the movies, you understood who George Romero was, you understood who the actors were, and then they started doing conventions. I would say like around, had to be like around 1998, 99. You started to see more actors from George Romero events, such as I remember first meeting Judy O'Day and Galen Ross at the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors when they did one in New York City.
Sure.
And Laurie Cardille was supposed to be there as well, and George was there. Well, I'm sorry, were you at that one?
Not that one. I had went to Fangoria's Weekend of Horrors from 1990 to 1996, all through my childhood and young adulthood.
Cool. So then, when was the first time? And I assume that meeting the guests at conventions, meaning the actors at conventions, preceded you going to the film locations and researching that, correct?
Yeah, it really did. And it's good that you mentioned that because I had I saw ads or something on the internet again. Internet was new, but they were doing a convention called Horrifying Weekend in Hunt Valley, Maryland, and this was 2004. And it was a big reunion of Day of the Dead actors, Dawn of the Dead actors, some Night of Living Dead actors, and George Romero himself. And I said to myself, I saw that, I gotta go. And so I went there, and this convention really amped up my feelings for the films because all the people were really, really nice, especially George. I mean, Laurie Cardille, so many people, all of them were so, so nice. And that made me love the films even more. And I think a lot of people go through that when they go to conventions and they meet some of these celebrities from their favorite films. And they enjoy the films more after meeting them because the people are so nice. So that really did have an effect on me. And that was 2004. And I didn't go to any film locations until about 2008.
And certainly when people meet the actors and artists from kind of the George Romero school of film, they're just more grounded and just a joy to meet, and they don't put the fans off with any kind of like standoffish behavior, and so people generally want to come back and meet everybody again because they're just so open to meeting their fans.
Yeah.
So about 2008 is what was like maybe 2008, 2010. We started being at the same shows and hanging out a bit, and so that's about that was about the time of the first Living Dead festivals. What was the first Living Dead festival you went to?
Sure. It was after the year of fundraising, which was 2012, where Gary
Right.
went to all the conventions to raise money to fix the chapel. So then 2013
Right.
was the next Living Dead festival that he put together. And that's when everybody who worked on the whole chapel movement and got into that got together for the first time.
Right. And that was the year before George came, right? I think George came the next year, 2014.
2014, yep.
And were you doing the tours back then, or you started doing the tours with Kevin and the Living Dead weekend?
Yeah, do tours. I don't know if he wanted to or had anybody that would want to do them. But I didn't start doing tours until Kevin started doing his show, The Living Dead Weekend, in 2015, after Gary didn't feel Living Dead Festival anymore.
Great. The Living Dead Festival didn't do really like tours, but they did location photo op visits with groups of the actors. So I remember Bill Cardill and George Costanza being at the bridge probably that year, 2013.
All those.
And there was the big one with Russ Striner and Judy O'Day in the cemetery, and they drove up in a not quite a Pontiac Le Mans. It was more like a GTO version, but it was cool. So you were at all of those, and kind of extended your kind of extended your passion for the film locations from that into Kevin's show. So before we talk about that, the film locations, you sent some photos over. Let's talk about your collection and what are some of your most prized items in your collection.
Sure. I mean, if you wanted to see my entire collection for, say, just Night of Living Dead, it would probably take you about 3 or 4 episodes. We don't have that much time, so we'll just go over like maybe 10 cool. So I sent you a couple photos. If you can go to first one.
I don't know if that was the first one, but it's the first one that I uploaded. So.
Okay. I don't see anything coming up yet.
You're not seeing that?
No. Oh, well, I might be on a delay. Okay. I'm looking at my laptop. Okay, this, I'm sure you know what this is, right?
Yep.
This is a page of artwork from the Fanico Night of the Living Dead comic book adaptation. It's drawn by Carlos Castro, and I believe this would be from the 2nd issue, and it's sort of a pictorial representation of what happened at Beekman's Diner, right?
Right.
And it's also
cool.
Artist Carlos Castro, and it's signed by George Romero at the bottom. That's an original.
So this is the actual art that would have made up one side of like a 2-page spread, correct?
Correct.
So and
cool.
Yeah, it's cool that they have the this. I was never a big fan of this style of artwork. I mean, this was the first Night of the Living Dead comic book that came out in the 80s, the late 80s. And I was never a big fan of this style of the artwork, but this is just a good realization of, what we don't see in the film, which is Ben talking about what happens to him at Beekman's Diner.
Right.
And so definitely one of the better pieces of art from that comic book.
Well, I'm glad I got it.
Cool. And then, yeah, there you go. So was this an eBay acquisition or from another collector?
Yeah, eBay.
eBay. Cool. And then we have, this is an interesting item. Not the item on the right side, but the item on the left side.
Okay. I'm looking at
Can you see that?
Just tell me what it is and I'll be able to talk about it. Oh,
well, it is a, okay, you can explain it.
Sure. This is an original stock certificate for, somebody who owns shares of Image 10 Inc., the creators of Night of Living Dead. And
Right.
This certificate was originally owned by John Russo. I bought it from him directly. It's the real thing. He also sells photocopies of it now, but this is the real deal. Of course, it doesn't mean I own any shares of the company, and we all know who owns those shares now. But it's a cool little item, part of the history of Night of the Living Dead.
Absolutely. So it may be hard for everybody to see, but it's dated May 1967.
Yeah, and it's signed Romero and John Russo.
Yeah, George Romero as president of Image 10 and John Russo as secretary. So neat item. So that I guess makes you an honorary Image 10 shareholder.
I'll take it.
But you're not going to be invited to any of the meetings. Sorry. And so, what do we have here?
Okay,
Two familiar faces.
Again, it'll take me a few seconds to see it on my end. Okay, this is cool. Okay, it's not a collectible per se, but it's a photo. It's a photo that I took. This was at a Horrifying convention in 2008. It was the year that the whole cast of Night of the Living Dead was doing a 40th anniversary sort of reunion tour. They were going to all the conventions, and it was my first time meeting Bill Heinzman, and it was my second time meeting Judy O'Day. And I don't know what made them do like sort of the opposite of the movie where Bill is going to try to choke her and strangle her. But they did it, and I took the photo, and then Judy wanted a copy of it, so I sent it to her on her website, and I just thought it was, like, super cool. Like, oh, it's a reversal of, the movie. It's Bill and Judy, but reversed.
And I just jumped back to your photo of you and Tim DeLeo. This I recognize is from Cinema Wasteland in Cleveland, so that puts it around 2015.
Yeah,
is that correct?
2015. It was the 30th anniversary reunion. The 30th anniversary reunion of Day of the Dead at Cinema Wasteland.
Yeah, I think there was. I think just about everybody was there, except for George. Everybody who was alive was there.
All the main cast.
Trying to think. Yeah, I mean, it was all the main cast members. It didn't, other than Howard Sherman, it didn't really go into any of the zombies or the behind the scenes people. I'd say about 4 to 6 of them came to the follow up show. But that was probably the last major time we were able to get like 12 people together from Day of the Dead. Before Joe Pilato, Gary Clark, and I'm trying to think of who else. Of course, Tim recently, before those folks passed away. And then we have this.
Yes.
Can you see this yet?
I can. Okay, everybody. This is a scrapbook, a Night of the Living Dead scrapbook, Volume 1. These were created by Carl Hardman and Marilyn Eastman, and they sold them at conventions. You can see there's a date on it, 1992. I've heard different stories as to how many they made. There might have been 25, and then maybe they made another 10 after the show, after they sold out. And I heard they did the same for volume 2, but my numbers might be off. Well, what is in this scrapbook? I didn't provide any pictures, and I couldn't dig it out in time for this show. But of course, you see it signed on the cover by Marilyn Eastman in the corner. Up above her, very lightly, is Carl Hardman. And in the book, they provide photocopies of newspaper articles and contracts, and they provide full color photos and black and white photos from behind the scenes of the movie. They show some sort of photocopied pages of proof sheets of various scenes from the film, and all kinds of ephemera, replicated for these scrapbooks concerning Night of the Living Dead. And it's one of my favorite items I own. It's just a cool thing, and I love that Marilyn and Carl made this themselves, and it looks handmade. You see, it's probably drawn there. It's not super professional, but it's really cool, and there aren't really that many out there of them. Here we have another.
Carl and Marilyn would do a lot of like they did a kind of banner-sized replica of the poster with the insurance policy on it, and they would do all kinds of hand-drawn little blood drips and take little plastic spiders and glue it onto the actual thing. So they were always very arts and crafty in their their proliferation of merchandise and collectibles. Very handmade approach to just about everything.
Actually, that sort of banner that you just described is one of the few things that I still don't have. So anybody out there that wants to hook me up, I would love it. But along those
there was a couple of those. I actually had 2 of them at one point. Supposedly there was a like a vinyl or a more. I had 2 paper versions of the banner, and it was basically on 2 dowels that you could open it up and display it like this way. And supposedly there was even fewer versions on like a more heavy material than paper. But like I said, they would customize everything. I mean, there's their cassette tape of the sound effects, some of the sound effects, and that had a little hand-drawn label and stuff like that. So they really like to jump in there and do it themselves, kind of.
If anyone has that cassette,
nothing was computer generated in their era.
Right.
So any other prized items, not even just Night of the Living Dead, but in your George Romero collection that we don't have a photo of, but you want to mention?
No, I have a lot of those things that you mentioned, but I have a couple things that I'm going to show here. I really like art. I've gotten a bunch of art over the years, and here's some cool art from some cool artists that I know that I've bought over the years. We're going to show this one first. Can you see that fully?
Yep.
This is
you bring it in a little closer.
This is the artwork for the program and sort of a mini poster for the Living Dead weekend of 2016 held in Evans City. It's by Byron Winton. And this is the original piece of art.
And I believe George Cassana and Bill Cardille were there, and that's why they're featured on the artwork. Is that correct?
If I remember correctly, Bill Cardille had just passed, and I believe the 16 show may have been George Cassana's final show.
Final show. Yeah, that's right. So the artwork is kind of a tribute to Bill having just passed away. awesome artwork from Mike Calandra. I'm sure a lot of people have collected his stuff over the years.
Off too. So there's the first piece, original piece of art. Speaking of Michael Calandra, this is the artwork for our 2019 show in Evans City. It was the poster and the program cover art, and it's also by Michael Calandra. We had a Crazies reunion.
Yeah, that was a somewhat rough convention because, as you remember,
I do.
The star, the lead guest, which is one of the stars of the Crazies, passed away at that time.
Yeah,
just before the event.
Yep.
Right.
I was feeling the and I was excited to have her there as a guest, and then she passed away a few weeks before, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that really put a damper on things, and just from the point of view, I mean, there just isn't as many people to bring from the Crazies. Even then, 5-6 years ago. Now it's almost impossible to find anybody. I would say maybe Lynn Lowry and Richard Franz are the last two major people from the Crazies that are still alive.
Check this out. This is a big one. This is also by Michael Calandra. In case people don't know, he has done a lot of Night of the Living Dead related art over the years. Some really great pieces. And he did various ones for some of the specific zombies like John Russo. This is the John Russo zombie. And this is the original artwork for that piece that he sells still at conventions.
So be honest, Mike Calandra lives out back, right? And you're just having him do artwork for you.
No, and well, this piece right here in my hand, I got it in a trade, and I had to go pick it up in Gatlinburg, Tennessee, but that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, I've often gone, we're at a show at a Living Dead weekend, and I walk past Mike's table. Sure. And immediately find something that I need to buy because he just has too much good stuff. Like original stuff, like the little, he has those blank trading cards and he does original 1/1, pieces on there, one of a kind pieces, I should say. And so I always find something that I want to buy from his table.
And this is the last collectible that I have, prepared to show people. This is a painting featuring some imagery from Night of the Living Dead by a local Pittsburgh artist named Cheryl Specht. You can see at the top Ben's head, and I mean it's a little gaudy there with little red splotches, but you have Johnny's face, you've got Marilyn's face, you've got all the things represented there. And
what was was this just a custom piece done for you, like by request, or
no? She was.
What was the context she did this for?
She was selling her art at a Horror Realm convention, and I saw this, and I said, I want to buy it, and it was also cheap.
Cool, and I see it's got the Stairs corpse in the bottom corner,
and Kyra.
At Kyra. Cool.
I thought this is really cool. I gotta buy it. That's the last piece that I have here. But you had said
it is a pretty cool thing. She's got the at the second Ben is shot. I mean, she's using the actual reference image of when he's shot and just doing him in that kind of that kind of high contrast art. How do I take you off the screen? There we go. It's kind of cool that she added that, as kind of a subtle or not so subtle reference to him being shot there in the film.
And then you mentioned that I should maybe
There we
speak
go.
things that I have that maybe aren't Night of Living Dead related. And I am a prop collector, a memorabilia collector for pretty much all of George Romero's films. And a couple of pieces that I have that would probably be impressive to people would be, okay, not many people know this, but I own Nick Tallo's biker costume from Dawn of the Dead, which consists of his vest, jacket, it has his shades and his bandana. So I have that. Creep Show, I have a bunch of things that I got. These are all pretty much from Nick Tallo. You know, he was affectionately known as Bomba. He was a crew member, and sometimes he would appear in some of George's films. He was in Dawn, he was in Night Riders, but that's pretty much as far as his appearances. But I also have the I have the Buddha from Creep Show, which you would see in a lot of interviews that Nick did over the years. It would be behind him. And in Creep Show, you see that in the segment, There's Something to Tide You Over. It's in Richard's house, just outside of his bathroom.
Right.
Also have
Richard's house, right.
I also have the Creep Show wheelchair, which you see in the Father's Day segment. Nathan Grantham is alive still, and he gets hit in the head as he's sitting in the wheelchair, and it falls over. And you see it in that section. You also see his son, played by Warner Shook, later in the sitting in the chair also, and you can scream it too. So I mean, there's no doubt these things are legit, and they came from Nick Tallo Bomba.
And the actor who's in the chair, that's John Lormer, right? Correct?
Yes, correct.
You know, the elder Grantham who's clocked in the head by the ashtray when he's sitting in the chair. And then I didn't realize that. So earlier in the segment, before you see that flashback, or what part of the segment is Warner Shook as the grandson sitting in the chair?
I believe it's after you see that flashback. He's in the dining room, and they're waiting.
When he's getting drunk, he's starting to get loaded.
That wheelchair as he's drinking, and they're waiting for Ed Harris to come back from the grave, you know, and then
Right.
Nathan that comes back from the grave.
Yeah, that's a pretty cool little detail I never realized. It's just like further disrespect by the family members who did turn out to be a bunch of vultures and just want his money.
True.
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. So you've got that wheelchair. Hopefully we get Warner back to an event and you can have him autograph it.
Well, I don't know if I would have to autograph it, but he could sit in it and I'll take a picture of him in it.
He could sit in it. Yeah, it could be. We'll get him a martini glass or wine glass, and he could sit in it for a photo op. Yeah. So yeah, you're not. That's actually a cool point about collectors, and you're not big into having like the original pieces like that autographed. You want to keep them as is, right?
No, I would not really. I don't even like having original, really expensive posters autographed, unless I have two of it. Then I'll make an exception. I'll keep one pristine, and then I'll get the other one signed. But generally, I don't like and real expensive posters signed.
Yeah, I agree with that. And there's so many things to get autographed, and the point to the autograph is about meeting the person, not just collecting their signature. If you have the chance to meet them, and so. And especially for like Night of the Living Dead, we license and try to have as many items produced for fans to be able to get autographed rather than going out and buying a very expensive lobby card set or one sheet poster, which is going to run in the thousands now, and, have that autographed. And that's a very fine line for a collector. It really just depends on your preference, but at some point, the actors signing it actually decreases the value of the item as a poster or prop or so forth. You want to leave those in as original condition as possible, because there's no telling when you need to sell something, and get the money back. So let's talk about your passion and what drove you into getting into the filming locations, which eventually led to you doing these location tours on the Living Dead weekends.
Sure. Well, like I said, I had seen some, horror fans on the internet, early 2000s, going to certain film locations, and I thought, oh, that's really interesting. I want to do it someday. And then I started to go, and the first place I went, really, as far as George Romero film locations, was the Monroeville Mall, and then the Monroeville Airport, and also the Night of Living Dead Evans City Cemetery. And I would see people take pictures, and I thought, okay, that's interesting, but maybe I might want to do something different. And I would go and I would take pictures the first couple times, and I'm like looking at these pictures, and they're not that good. I'm like, you're just taking random pictures at these places, and it just doesn't seem like it's that cool. So then I thought maybe I should try to get the exact shots that you see from a film. Find things that match and get that exact same angle, the same shot, and then you can compare these on social media or anywhere, and you can see how things have changed dramatically or not very dramatically from, say, 1968 to 2013 or whatnot. So I started to do sort of photo comparisons where I would try to get those exact angles. And I like those a lot. It's better than just getting like some kind of random photo. And sometimes I see these groups on Facebook where there's like film location groups and people just take these weird photos and try to compare it to the movie. And you can't even match anything to really make a really good comparison and see what they look like compared to from the movie and then today. So it sort of makes sense to get those exact shots to really get a good look at these things and places.
And it's also the process that you're talking about, because I've done the same thing. It really kind of goes hand in hand with if you're a fan and researcher of George's films, because one, almost everything was done on location.
Right.
Especially something like Night of the Living Dead, which is, my area of, expertise and research. I haven't done it as much with his other films. But something like Night of the Living Dead is 100%, locations, even to the point where they would outfit, something to look like something else, like the basement of their office building to look like the basement of a farmhouse.
Sure.
So it goes hand in hand with that, but also these locations, as maybe the fans don't know as much, or certainly you bring this out to the people when you're doing a location tour, but these locations they're not exactly like what you see in the film. So there's a lot of like cheating of angles and so forth. Like, we're going to talk about your example here is the cemetery, recreation of the cemetery. Let's talk about that. The cemetery in Night of the Living Dead, Evans City Cemetery, is this kind of square-shaped cemetery, but they only use a little portion of it, like probably the furthest most corner by like maybe quarter at the most by the entrance.
Right.
Even though in the film it looks like they're driving and then walking through this like much larger cemetery.
Very true.
So I mean, it really it goes along, wanting to figure out every angle where things were shot, kind of goes along with that. And just I can't imagine going to Evans City Cemetery, using this one as an example, and just taking a picture, like just a random picture of some tombstones and saying, cool, I was here, right?
But people, it makes sense to me to get those exact shots.
Right. Although I have to say, I guess Night of the Living Dead fans or George Romero fans, and not at the dedication level of ourselves, but the ones that have made the trek out to Evans City that you'll run into. I mean, you always run into somebody when you're up there.
Right.
They have done their research because they're always in the same area, so they do want to get as much out of it as possible. They always end up in the same area. I remember. So I guess this was either 2012 or 2013. A friend from California was at the Living Dead Festival, and because he's on the other side of the country, he's not always around the filming location, so he wasn't able to get, it's not a thing he can go to all the time. So I took him out to the opening road shot, and we looked at that, and then we went to the cemetery, and there's Daz roaming around at about 6 or 7 o'clock in the morning. So there's almost always somebody from Evans City, or somebody at the cemetery at any given time, and they do seem to know where to look. You don't really see people wandering aimlessly about, or at least in my experience. I just haven't seen people doing that. What is explain this kind of recreation that you've put together that we're going to look at now?
Sure.
What's the idea behind this? Is it getting those exact shots, or again, are you trying to? What's your motivation to figure out the exact shots? Is it like, does it help show how the film was put together, a particular film?
Well, for me, I'm just that type of, detail-oriented person. Like, I want to know exactly where the shots were, and I want to know, can I recreate them? And you sort of talked about it a little bit, where sometimes these places have changed, and sometimes they've changed a lot, but there are details that are still the same. And then, for example, the Evans City Cemetery from Night of Living Dead has changed a little bit over the years. Some of the gravestones and things have, their positions have changed a little bit, because in 1984, a sort of a tornado or some kind of storm came through the cemetery, and it supposedly unearthed some bodies and upended some tombstones and stuff. So some things there are a little bit off kilter from what you would see in the movie, but then they're still in pretty much the same areas, though.
You're right. Interesting. We're gonna. I noticed that in some of your shots, which we're gonna get to in a second here. But an interesting thing about that storm, it was this group of tornadoes, this odd weather event that doesn't happen often, or certainly hasn't happened in that area in I believe it was 85 or 86. And am I losing Larry there? Let's see. This tornado or group of tornadoes that ripped through there did uproot a lot of the trees and change the basic,
I'm not hearing any audio from you. Oh, you're frozen. Jim, where are you? Jim.
Are you back, Larry? Can you hear me?
I hear you now. I wasn't hearing you for about a minute or so.
Okay, I see comments now saying Frozen. I only saw a spinning icon for you, so. But anyway, yeah, we're back. I don't know if that was my connection or your connection. Your audio was dropping out just before that was dropping out a little for me. But anyway, as I was mentioning that that hurricane or tornado, despite the rumors, did not uproot bodies and gravestones. So as you see, the gravestones are pretty much the same. A lot of trees are different, as we'll see in some of your shots. I'm not normally researching or doing comparison shots of locations as much as you do it. So I just have like a general sense of like, yeah, that's there. But when you see it side by side, it's like, oh yeah, that's the landscaping has changed dramatically with some of the trees and so forth. So your first image here is, of course, the opening road. And then that's how it is. When did you take these shots?
All of these shots that I'm showing you here for this presentation were taken after the Living Dead weekend in 2018 when we had the Night of the Living Dead 50th anniversary, show.
Right.
So the fall, October 2018.
And where, explain to people who don't know, where is this located in proximity to the cemetery?
Sure. When you drive from Evans City to the cemetery, you are on, it starts off as Pioneer Road, I believe, in Evans City, and then it turns into, I think, Franklin Road. So when you go into this cemetery, you bear left coming from Evans City. But if you were to keep going up that road about 2 or 3 miles, maybe 3 miles, you would come to these spots from the opening scenes of the movie. There are 4 of them in a small area.
Right. So we could see it better in this shot. And this is, again, one of the reasons why when we look at filming locations in a George Romero film, we're trying to get as much accuracy and detail as possible because, as you just said, the first 4 shots in the film are all on this same stretch of road.
Right. They're right there.
Yeah, explain how that works. We're thinking of how Night of the Living Dead opens for the people listening and watching.
Yeah, so you're
there's 4 shots that have credits, including the title.
Right.
How does that all work in this one stretch of road?
Scene from the movie, and you see the car, the Le Mans, coming up the road. This is the first shot that you see in the movie.
Right.
Second shot would be down below, which is where the car just came from. So if you look, there's a white house there, and you see a driveway in front of the house. The house is in the curve there at the top of the screen, and you see their driveway in front of that white house. That is where the second shot is. So the camera would have been stood right there at the sort of in the middle of their driveway in front of the house.
Right.
And that's where you see the shot of the car going by screen, and you see the title Night of the Living Dead.
And it kind of disappears around the bend, and then you basically see it where it is. It continues up to where it is in this shot, and that's like much further in that sequence.
What they did, that was the second shot where you see the title card, and then what they did was they walked across the street, pretty much. And they set up the camera, and they had the car drive by camera going towards that curve. Okay, so that would be the third shot. And then they turn the camera around, and you see the car going around that curve at the top of the screen. So those are the 4 shots of the beginning of the movie.
So basically, the first 2 shots have the car going in the same direction, just from different angles. And Correct. Then the next 2 shots, again, so the driveway that you're talking about is, if looking at this shot that we're looking at right now, if you just go above the car, there's a house behind those trees. You can see it poking out, and there is a little curved driveway right there.
Yep.
kind of to the left of where the car is on the screen. There's a further to the right of the car, and kind of hidden by a bend in the road is that's the actual curve of the road. It's a very winding road. It's very dangerous to be, now there's a lot more cars on the road in the area, and it's very dangerous to be stopping and taking photographs or standing across the road. But I guess back then it was a lot less, populated. So
Sure, yeah.
And then we have, so the fifth shot of the film is this kind of hairpin turn into the cemetery.
Correct.
And it also, as you said, it's maybe about 2 miles away from where that other shot was, correct? Or the first 4 shots.
Right. So you see, this is the image from the movie. The car comes down the road from the right side of the screen, curves around into the cemetery, and and I provide the photo, the next one, of what it looks like today, and you see the sign for Evans City Cemetery.
And at that time, there was is that the Evans? Is there an Evans City Cemetery sign, a small one, back in '67, or is that like further up and it just says cemetery entrance and it's got buckshot in it?
Right, there is that sign. I don't know if there was any other signs there. You can't see any from what you see in the image, except for that one yellow sign that's up there at the underneath the A in lab. It's right there.
We don't know if there's a marker, also like a long sign. I think it's in stone.
Right.
That's further up this winding drive, up this winding hill, up to the cemetery itself. Do we know if that was there in '67?
I'm not positive. I would have to look up that information.
Okay, just checking to see if anybody has a question here. So then we're in the cemetery. This is your next shot. So there's a few shots, as I mentioned before, of them driving through the cemetery, but basically the same stretch of road. They just, again, move the camera around to make it look like a much bigger cemetery as it is, and that the car actually drove a far distance into the cemetery away from the entrance.
Right.
But then we end up here when they get out of the car, Johnny and Barbara get out of the car, and they walk to the father's grave. Correct.
So what I do at these locations, I try to get the same angle, and I'll take the photo of, just the spot so you can compare it. And then I'll have a tripod with me, and I'll set up the camera, and then I'll want to get into the photo. So I end up being one of the characters. And then sometimes I'll do another photo, and I'll be another one of the characters. And then in Photoshop, I will combine them for funny effect. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do this, but it's something that I and it's pretty fun. And you'll see that in the next couple photos where I get in the photo as the characters.
So I don't, the wreath or flower arrangement looks accurate, but I don't remember Barbara wearing a Dawn of the Dead. And Johnny's got one too. So, so Johnny and Barbara were closet Dawn of the Dead fans at the time.
Yeah.
Into the future, because Dawn of the Dead hadn't been made when they went to place a wreath on Dad's grave.
Photoshop, I combine them.
Yeah.
It's a pretty simple thing. When you have the same exact angles, it's just like doing a wipe or something. You erase part of it and you join it easily. Nice.
Here's a cool bit of I don't know if it's really trivia. I guess it's more a bizarre viewpoint than anything else. But so as we know, next to the families, the fictitious Johnny and Barbara family of Johnny and Barbara's father's grave. Next to that is the Blair Stone, what's known as the Blair Stone. And that's this kind of headstone, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like where they put the name of the family, and then there's several people actually buried in that plot. Is that correct?
I'm pretty sure it's called a monument. So they
Monument.
just big monument stone with the family name, and then they have a lot of different people around it that are from the family.
But now the actual stone that they're at, which we're in the movie, we're not seeing the name, is the family name is Cole, correct?
Yeah, correct.
And there's more than one person buried there.
Yes, there's Gracie and no, I'm drawing a blank on the husband's name.
So in licensing Night of the Living Dead, or how do you working with companies that license Night of the Living Dead, Larry, you're sideways. I don't know if you see that, but in working with companies that license Night of the Living Dead and release products, we've had the situation come up where they insist that Johnny's family name is Cole. Oh. So they want to list the family name as Cole. So it would be Johnny Cole and Barbara Cole, assuming that Barbara's not yet married. I've basically, being one of the administrators of the property, I've shot that down in every situation. What do you think of that? Should Johnny and Barbara's family name be considered Cole?
No,
I mean, you don't really
just what's there at the cemetery. It's not really their father or anything,
right? Exactly. You're not really seeing it in the film, so like they're not at the Blair Stone, so that we would know that their name is Blair. So because it's a real cemetery, I mean, you really can't say that their name is Cole. So yeah, that's been my position on it. And that's one of the things playing with, a film property, the world created, the characters created by a film property, and doing that film on location so that, different landmarks, and in this case, real tombstones end up in a film. How much does that add to the story? I think something like that doesn't, because it's not really being presented that way, and it's just a location being used for the purpose of that.
Yeah, you're correct.
Yeah. Okay, good. I'm glad I made the right call on that one. So, and then we have of course, our favorite cemetery ghoul shows up. And first of all, for the people that haven't been there, describe, again, this Evans City Cemetery is kind of square. We're that Blair headstone, Cole headstone, this is all in like a small area. Well, I'm sorry, not a small area. This is all on one edge of the cemetery. There aren't many. There's a few gravestones right across from these stones that we're looking at, but not too many. That's been expanded over the years to add a few more gravestones. There's like a road here that a car can drive down, and we can't see it, but it would be to the left of this image where you're kneeling down in front of the tombstones. So looking into this photo, that's pretty much the cemetery. How far does this go back? Like, how would you describe that to everybody? How far back does the cemetery go from this viewpoint?
It's an okay size, not super big. But there's a lot of cemetery there where it's just not used. Everything is in this really compact space. In this photo that you're looking at here, where the cemetery zombie played by Bill Heinzman is up at the top of the screen, just right is where the Blair Stone is and where their father is next to that. And then on the left side of this shot right here is where you have the Nicholas Kramer stone, where Judy cowers beside it as her brother is, tussling with the zombie. So it's all right there, pretty much everything you would want to see, and then a couple things over by the chapel and such. But
Right. So to give everybody an idea of the size of the cemetery, if they haven't been there, this viewpoint, as you said, where it is being shot just past those headstones that we previously were looking at. It's
Right.
the same angle, it's just further in. And then you can see that line of trees. There's like the smaller kind of bush-like trees, but then there's like the taller trees. Beyond that, there's a good number of, which we can't see, there's a good number of gravestones past that. I would say like maybe an equitable amount to what we're looking at. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's pretty much the center where those trees are there. That's
Right.
just the center of the graveyard.
So, and then there's obviously a lot more to the left of this image, and then there's a good deal more, I'd say less than to the left side, but a good deal more to the right side as well. So that should give you we're basically at one edge of the cemetery, which is the road that runs alongside where the entrance was, the car entrance. And that gives you an idea of like what we're looking at, looking into the cemetery. It's about twice as far back as the amount that we're seeing here. And then there's more to the left and the right. So we're kind of like in the middle.
Correct.
And that's where, as we said, Bill Heinzman first comes walking. You can see that little pointed to the right. There's that tombstone or headstone that has a little bit of a point to it, kind of like looks like one of those buildings that has like a little apex. And there it is.
Right.
Up there. So that's a good reference for that. And then kind of from the same angle, we're looking at the other side of the Blair Stone, correct?
No, the Blair Stone would be to the immediate
I'm sorry, right.
right.
The immediate right.
Yeah.
So that's the Blair Stone poking in the right side.
Correct.
Yeah. And then there's that little pointed, again, for reference, I'd say about five rows back.
It's behind her.
Right. So they're making it, again, movie logistics. They're making it look like she's walking back from the direction that they came, or the camera's making it. What you could see, there's that pointed headstone just to the left of Johnny. And in the movie, they make it seem like they walked way from the back there in this direction.
Right.
In fact, you do see them wandering around the same area that Bill Heinzman is wandering around.
Come from that
here, right? But the entrance is actually behind the camera, so they didn't really walk very far at all. But again, that's the magic of making a movie, and George was very good at kind of setting those things up and piecing that together. So now we have all three characters, kind of the same angle, but all three characters walking in the same shot.
I have to tell you something at this point. Sometimes if some of the stones don't line up properly, it's because my angle is off. Like I've really actually screwed up the shot. I'm trying to get it. And I've noticed that in trying to do these comparisons that some of my angles are off. But if you get the exact right angle, that things will line up pretty much perfectly.
Well, this is pretty good. I mean, you've got so Johnny is covering the Blair, the BL of Blair.
Correct.
And then you can see that one tombstone kind of poking right out to the left of the Blair Stone in the distance, and Heinzman is next to that.
This is a real good one.
And you've got that lined up pretty well. That must be a new stone there that kind of it looks like it's got an empty space in the middle. You see that? We're next to the flags. That's an interesting tombstone. I don't remember seeing that before. But here's the thing that we were talking about. I mean, look at the number of trees that are gone from 67, especially like the area that is in back of where Judy is, where Barbara is, compared to this.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So a good deal of those. I mean, the trees still have. This must have been earlier fall when you took these shots, because the trees still have leaves on them.
It would be October, early October after Living Day weekend, which was like October 7th or something that year.
Right. So I think John Vulo can tell us, and I'm sure he will, but I think when they filmed this, it was late October or November. So you could see some of the larger trees there in the distance, which may, I mean, the trees here that have leaves, they may not have been there in 67. They may have been planted after that, after the storm took out a great number of these other trees that you see there. But you can see the ones in the distance are completely devoid of leaves.
And here's another one of my examples of me inserting myself into the photo recreations in various different poses. It's fun.
And just to point out, the little that little marker that's between the two images of you, those are little Civil War markers for the deceased that were, enlisted in this, participated in the Civil War.
Okay.
They've helped to, especially to line up shots, because those have always been there. So they help to figure out, where things are. It almost acts as a marker, and you can line gravestones up with these markers. The same with the flags, although the flags change here and there. But it's great to have those those little extra ways to figure out where the locations are. So then we get closer when a closer shot of Bill Heinzman when he says, there comes one of them now. And there's that, again, stone that's got the little apex top to it.
Right.
And how it looks in recent times.
Hey, the movie doesn't look that bad in 16:9.
Yeah. Well, here you start to lose some, a little bit more, and the top of her head is gone. But
yeah. So
here, and there's an interesting bit with this. So here you've recreated it in the same orientation to the tombstone, but
sure,
to the monument marker. But what can you tell us about this shot, the way it was done in 67?
Yeah, the interesting thing about this that I discovered in my research of the cemetery and trying to recreate these shots, there is another shot, of course, of her, and you can see the different stones behind her on the ground. And then if you try to recreate that shot, the stones don't match. So then you figure out, okay, they're going in different directions, that this whole monument has been turned. It's really the wrong position from what you see it from when they filmed in the movie there. It's actually should be turned clockwise, one turn, one side. And then everything behind her would match in the other shots that you see cemetery behind her. But it's a position these days.
And I think what you're talking about, so this shot is like an up angle shot. and you've recreated that as well. But there's noticeably a bush there, which it could have been placed there in in 60 or after 67, I would say. But there's other angles more looking down, and you can see tombstones behind her.
Correct.
So I have this shot, which we showed when we did the unseen Night of the Living Dead photographs at the Living Dead weekend, and then again on NIGHTCAST. But this is a rare shot of Judy actually being filmed in the cemetery. And we actually found out that Judy Ridley took this photo because it's a 35 millimeter negative. And lo and behold, we found a photo that Carl took of Judy holding the 35 millimeter camera. So here you can see right there in back of her is the Blair stone and the coal stone.
Well,
so
could be there's a big coal monument, and then there's a small one where her father was, and then beside that is the Blair one. So there should be two big ones. In the movie, you would see Bill Heinzman walk between the trees, and this one you see the coal one there. That big one's also a coal.
So that's different than the. So what you're saying is this one, this large stone that we're seeing to the right of her in the background, that could be a coal stone. It could be the one that Heinzman runs past. In fact, that tree, don't they also when they're made, when Johnny and Barbara are made to be looking, when it's made to look like they're walking through the cemetery, they walk past the same tree, correct?
They would probably be on the other side of it, but yeah, pretty much.
So let's see.
Yeah, it would be the same. But this photo shows exactly that the Nicholas Kramer stone these days does not face in that direction.
Right. I thought I saw it in one of the other. Oh, there it is. So you can see it just pop. You can see the Nicholas Kramer stone just popping up above the Blair stone.
Right.
In this shot. So it gives you an idea. I mean, she was in that position. She was in that location, but the positioning was different. She's facing. Technically the Johnny and Cemetery Ghoul struggle is happening behind her, correct? Because that's where the stone is that Johnny hits his head on.
Yeah.
So she's looking this way, and it's actually should be happening behind her.
Yep.
So here's the stone that Johnny hits his head on. That's the Myers stone. Is that correct?
Yeah, Clyde Lewis Myers.
Right. So those three little stones behind Heinzman to the left.
Mm-hmm.
If you look at the other shot in the film it's Barbara at the Kramer stone, but it's more of a down angle. And as they're struggling, I mean, the shot that you have here is when the lightning hits her face and the realization that her brother's dead,
correct,
or is not able to help her anymore. But there's a previous shot where it's kind of looking down. You can actually see these three stones, or at least two of them, kind of poking in the frame behind her.
Yeah.
So it shows that her looking this direction, the fight is actually taking place behind her.
Right. She and Bill are looking in the same direction.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. And so that's again, like we said, that's the fun of of putting this stuff together, because you figure out how they made the location that they had in a limited amount of time work to put this movie together piece by piece. I've had people. I noticed there's some coins on the stone, and some people have mentioned when they visit the cemetery, why is it like that? Why are people leaving coins on the stone? Well, in the Jewish tradition, Jewish cemeteries, you leave rocks when you visit a relative or family member or friends gravestone. You leave a rock as a remembrance that you were there, and this seems to be fans paying their respects by saying we were here, and respect the place, and hold it sacred. They're not leaving Night of the Living Dead paraphernalia there, which would kind of be not a good idea. So it's great that people respect it and pay a little bit of homage to the folks. It being these are real film locations, and it's a real cemetery where family members have loved ones buried.
Yeah, that's very important to remember. It's a real cemetery. That means something. It's not just a film set. It's really a cemetery. So everybody, please be respectful when you go there.
Right. And generally everybody has, because you find that with the Monroeville Mall and all the other locations, that the fans want to keep, the majority of the fans, the overwhelming majority, want to keep these places as they were, and don't want to break pieces off of things and do anything like that. It's like a sacred location, and people want to keep it the way it is, so that it can continue to be enjoyed in the future. So then we have, after the struggle and Johnny's been bested, Barbara makes a run for it. Yeah. And so this is interesting because, again, we're kind of in the same angle that the rest of everything else was, or the same general area that everything else in this scene was shot. And you can see the chapel in the background.
My photo is a little bit off because I don't show enough of that third window to the left.
There we go. Well, yeah, but it's pretty close.
Pretty close.
And there you can see, there were some, so she's basically running down a road. You can't really see, you could see it much better in your shot, and I'm sure it was paved since 1967. And there's, I don't know how many trees are there. I don't know, is that tree the tree by the chapel, I think, is the same, or maybe not. It's hard to tell.
It is hard to tell.
But that kind of white tree with the white bark, I don't think that was there. So a lot of this is different, but you can see there's more gravestones on the other side of this road. But this little road that you can drive upon to get to wherever, if you're visiting the cemetery as an actual cemetery where you have family members or friends buried, your car can drive down this road, the entrance being just past where you see the chapel in the upper left-hand corner.
Are you these images? Because it's stuck on my computer on me at the Clyde Lewis Myers Stone.
That's a good question. You can still hear me, correct?
I can hear you through my phone where I'm filming, but okay. I just refreshed and it's showing the correct stuff.
Okay. So so this road goes all around. I don't know if it's completely paved, but all around the cemetery, but it does go all around the perimeter of the cemetery, and that little extra area to the side of the chapel, there are stones there as well, but not too many. I'd say like about 20 feet past that is like a steep a steep incline, so
Right.
wouldn't be able to put anything there. And another here you can see that there's nothing past Heinzman, but this is right alongside the chapel where the car was parked, where the Pontiac was parked, and just past the entrance, and very fall. John Vulo was saying he's thinking it was November by his calculations because there's absolutely nothing on those trees.
Right.
Hold on one second. There we go. And then that's how it is today. A lot more overgrown.
Yeah.
What do you think? Is that one of those trees? Is that
Ooh.
one of those trees grown up?
It has to be one of those, you know. I don't know if it's the Broken Dead one or if it's the big one, but it has to be.
Night of Living Dead has outlasted the foliage in the area. But here again, showing the location of the car. I think they probably cheated the car back a little bit in order to get that image. It's hard to tell because the car looks much closer to the.
Well, the difference there is because of the two different times they filmed. That's what I always thought, because when they first stopped the car, it's way up, but then when they get, it seems to be in a different position. Especially, you can see it's different when Bill Heinzman tries to smash the glass. So
well,
positions, no matter how you slice it.
Both of these are done in the fall.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I believe it's the reverse angle looking at Barbara that was done earlier in the shoot, which would have been like early summer. Well, I guess June. It being the first thing that they filmed. So there, the car, I guess, is more in front of the chapel. But I don't know why they cheated this over, because there it looks like the driver or the passenger side door would be closer to that. It would be like in front of that window to the right of the chapel.
Yeah.
And here it's like, it's definitely moved away. Now, maybe they did that because where else was he going to find a rock to throw through throw through that window?
Sure.
But you got that angle pretty close, and you can see how overgrown it is. And then this angle, which is right on. And it's great to see how good the chapel looks, even compared to 1967.
Yes, thanks to the fans and Gary Striner. Together,
I mean, in 1999 or 2005, it was looking pretty bad. So, it looked nothing like the film, and
better than it looked in the movie, even, and that's great.
Yeah. But it still has the same kind of cool aura about it. So I like that. And what else could we say about the this what is this? Do we know who is slumped over behind the car? So let's go back to that shot. I assume that they're talking about this. And so I believe Wayne's talking about this photograph. And, well, what we could say is from left to right is the fellow on the most right side adjusting his cap, that's Carl Hardman. And if we were to zoom in, we could see he's got a camera hanging from his, around his neck. It's down on his, waist area. And then there's actually 3 people there. The gentleman in the light colored jacket, that's Rudy Ritchie. And then behind the camera is George Romero. And then there's a person there. It looks like one person, looks like George is wearing something maybe brown or tannish, but that's actually Marilyn Eastman, kind of like slumped on the ground or maybe propped up on one elbow. And then just behind the car with his head down, he's got headphones on, that's Gary. And then that's, of course, Russ walking with the floral display. So I hope that answers that question. John is saying the shot of Judy from the passenger side and the car stopping, that's what was from the June shoot, the first day in the cemetery. And I want to ask you, Larry, that artwork that you have of John Russo as a ghoul, what relation does that have to the cemetery?
Well, John Russo was supposed to be, or was slated to be, the cemetery zombie, and then for whatever reason, I guess that would be in the first time they filmed at the cemetery.
Right.
Bulo will correct me. And then maybe Heinzman was the cemetery zombie at the second time. Is that how it went?
Exactly. So, because that shot of Jack Russo is used, it's seen quite often, and to many people it just looks like a generic ghoul, but that is actually the unused. That's Jack as the unused cemetery ghoul. So he was slated to play the cemetery ghoul. I don't believe in June Heinzman was even there at the time. There's no photographs of him being there. Although we, so I would just assume at that point he wasn't working on the film yet. He had probably invested in it and knew it was being worked on, but just hadn't started working on it until the farmhouse shooting. At which point he started playing a ghoul, and we could tell that because his hair is short. But then later, when this was all done, kind of like to fill in, and Heinzman, in fact, Bill Heinzman is the person who took this photo. So as they were filming this in the fall, Bill was walking around taking these shots of the any of those color shots you see of them filming in the cemetery. That's Bill taking them with a 35 millimeter camera, and we know that because again, there's Carl with the camera that took the 120, the larger square shaped negatives, like you saw, like you mentioned. Marilyn's scrapbook has some of the proof sheets that show those negatives. They're like larger square negatives. That's 120 film. There's Carl in almost all these color shots. He's in some of the other ones too, of George filming Johnny or Russ and Judy walking around, the various parts of the cemetery. So Heinzman, for all we know, is not there until the fall.
Right.
And so it makes sense that at some point it was just determined he was an imposing figure as a ghoul, probably from looking at some of the other scenes that were shot, and he just looks good and would just be a more intimidating ghoul for the first one that we see. And let's see if we have any other.
I think that's the last location photo.
That's the last of the location photos. There's the other cemetery ghoul that never got used and was supposed to. So I believe John can correct me on that. What he's talking about is before Heinzman, John believes from George's personal script, from looking through George's personal script and the notes that he has in there, that before it was decided that Heinzman would play the cemetery ghoul, it was actually Robert Faust, the second tire iron, the second a ghoul that gets his head bashed by Ben with the tire iron. It's thought from George's notes that, and the reason why Robert is one of the ghouls that gets, his head bashed in, that he was going to be brought out to the cemetery to play the cemetery ghoul.
Okay.
So, sorry, not Robert, Tom Faust.
Jack.
And so, yes, and so that's why he's in the scene with Terry Gandell getting his head bashed in. That would have been like continuity to have, him play looks pretty effective as as one of the ghouls, especially when he's bashing the headlights in and, they have the light shining on his face. So it was thought that he was going to be the cemetery ghoul based on George's notes of what he needed to film and, who he needed to bring back, following the kind of, bursts of filming that they did along the way, what he needed to get to complete the film. But at some point, it was Heinzman, and that's always led to like a great little continuity piece, because it is Heinzman who comes through the window at the end.
Right.
And so, and that's, I'm sure they featured it because he looks good. They featured him looking up, and it's a close up, and he looks pretty scary, and and he was a friend of everybody that worked there. So it's like, let's put our, let's feature our friend. But that, worked out really nice to have him open the film. And then he's one of the first ghouls that finally breaks through and gets into the farmhouse.
Really?
So just a really cool little, if it had been Tom Faust, he would have gotten killed early on, and they wouldn't have been able to do that. So it's just a nice little thing that ties the film together. But what we don't have pictures of it, but how did they further cheat the the car wrecking against the tree and so forth?
Okay, well, yeah. If you follow the logic of the movie, she gets in the car, pulls the emergency brake, and it starts to roll down the hill, and that goes around the corner from the chapel. And you would think then the next shot would be further down the road, beside the chapel, but it's not really there. So you have to look for it and figure out, okay, it was my second time there. I was with Kevin and Mandy and Daz, and we were in the cemetery through 2012, and I figured it out on the spot. And I looked up the road from the chapel. There's the two roads. There's one that goes in front of it and one beside it. The one beside it goes into the cemetery on the chapel's right. I think this is it. And I went and looked up, and I walked over, and it works. It doesn't have the trees there, anymore. But of course, we talked about those tornadoes and such that came through in '85. So some of the trees are gone. The trees don't match. But then, if you look at the very shot where the tree and the car meet, which is, we'll get into that in a second, in the movie, when the car stops beside that tree, just above the roof line, you can see a couple stones along a path. And it's because that shot was in the cemetery up the road from the chapel a little bit, and they just cheated. So they had Bill Heinzman following the car as it came down the path. It went against the tree there, which they covered up an accident that Josephine Striner had with the car, where she actually damaged that side of the car somehow, and they incorporated it into the movie, where they drove the car beside this tree, and it looks like the tree caused the damage. Well, really, the damage was there first, and then like you can match the stones above the roof line of the car and see them on the path that's up there, you know, in the cemetery, and you can match it exactly. I've done it before. I've made the comparisons. It matches exactly. It's just another cheat. So then after that, she runs from the car and she heads down a road and over to the farmhouse property.
Right. So I want to talk about that as well. But yeah, so if you're going to the, you know, I made the same general discovery, you know, when I first went to the cemetery. If you're watching the movie and you see the car crash, you know, you're seeing it go down this hill.
Right.
And so, you know, that's the first thing. The car goes down this hill, and you see Heinzman go after it. You know, Cemetery Ghoul goes after it, and he's kind of elevated a bit because there's like, there's
inside the chapel.
There's a steep incline, but there's also the chapel sits on a small hill, which itself is kind of hard to walk up. You know, to just physically walk up that. So he's going down that. It looks pretty steep. If you're watching the movie, when the car crashes, you assume that at the bottom of the hill there's more gravestones, because you can see them, like you said, when she gets out of the car. There's like more. It seems like there's, you know, the cemetery's on a hill, and there's also graves at the bottom of the hill. But that's not the case at all. They just, when you're there, you can see the car goes down that hill, kind of disappears around the bend with Heinzman going after it, and then they just film the reverse angle and backed way up, and it's a less steep incline. So when you see it coming towards the camera and it finally hits that tree, or, you know, is made to look like it hits the tree, it's just not very steep at all. And they just went backwards, and okay, you know, it works. But that entire, I think, there's the trees, which are gone now, and there was a fence, and it looked like a field back then, like an undeveloped field. But now there's like a whole industrial building there, or something, some kind of industrial business, right? So it doesn't quite lend itself to the isolated feel that you get from the movie. You know, that they're out like in the middle of nowhere. It's like a lot more populated now. So
people have to remember this. You're going to film location, and usually people don't do that. You see a film, and it doesn't matter where all these things took place in real life. Nobody's ever going to know that unless you go. Most people don't usually, and they just watch a movie and these things make sense. But then when you go there to an actual location, you see things don't necessarily make sense, but they don't have to. It's a movie. Most people don't go to these locations like I do, and other people.
and besides going to the locations, I mean, in 1968 or even in the 1970s, this was all shown on film. Nobody had the ability, unless you were a projectionist and the film ended up in your hands, you know, nobody had the ability to slow things down and look
every little detail.
Yeah, right. You know, so it was never determined that, you know, anybody would be, you know, looking at these details in the film so well. But again, you know, I always have said, you know, we do it to see how the film was made, not to, you know, make fun of the process of making the film.
No, not at all. So in this process of me figuring out, say, the shots in the cemetery from Night of the Living Dead, it also proved, you know, wrong all those people over the years who had said that, hey, it was filmed in my cemetery, it was filmed in Livermore Cemetery, it's filmed in all these places. Okay. Of course, through social media, we have access now these days to the creators of the film, and they all can tell you that it was not filmed anywhere else except for the Evans City Cemetery. But I've also gone through the trouble of finding each and every shot from the movie, and I know they're all in that cemetery. So it's irrefutable. It didn't happen over here at New State College. It didn't happen in Livermore or other places.
And as Kevin said when we had him on a few weeks back, Kevin Kreis, who runs the Living Dead Weekend, he said, having a museum and shop year round gets all kinds of people coming in and claiming all kinds of things. And he said there's a lot less of that now.
Right.
Because, we do talks like this and, and try to get information out there, and you do location tours and and so forth. So all of that helps. I just think, any kind of popular culture work that has this kind of following, you're always going to get people who, oh yes, I know this person was in it. My grandfather's, friends, roommates, cousins, uncle was in there. And so everybody knows somebody, and there's just been all of that over the years, but little by little. And we now have people like John Vulo finding every single person that set foot somewhere in the vicinity of the film, to kind of get rid of there's so much less room for rumor and myth at this point.
Right.
So, but you're always going to have that with something that's this popular.
True.
That
I don't think anybody's ever asked, and maybe you know the answer. I don't know the answer. Where did they film those extra scenes in a cemetery in the 30th anniversary edition of Night of the Living Dead?
Well, you're absolutely correct. I've never asked. I've never had the inclination to ask anything about that.
We need to know. So, maybe caused some of these people to think it was filmed in their cemetery, and maybe they're right because they filmed scenes there for the 30th anniversary edition. I just don't know where they filmed those scenes.
Yeah, that could be true, but you know what? Let's just put it in context. Anybody that wants to have their cemetery take credit for the 30th anniversary, let's let those people have it. Because,
come on. Maybe it could explain some of the misperceptions.
I don't know if you were around for it or were aware of it, but you remember when the Internet Movie Database used to have a comment section for each film, right? Yeah. So were you ever there for the guy that swore that there was this almost a cult-like connection to Plan 9 from Outer Space and Night of the Living Dead?
No, I don't.
And it was this was a true thing, and he was one of the people that swore, and it had something to do with the cemetery, that it was that there was a message in Night of the Living Dead and Plan 9 from Outer Space that connected somehow. What the message is, I don't remember. And he swore that the cemetery was in Moon Township, and that there was significance to the names on the tombstones, and that the filmmakers were trying to get some kind of conspiracy theory message out of the whole thing. But I mean, this was a real thing that was being dealt with by myself and like several of the other fans. To some extent, it wasn't a major thing on my to-do list at the time to debunk this person and their viewpoint, but but it was a real thing. I mean, he was really going off on how there was some kind of conspiratorial connection between Night of the Living Dead and Plan 9 from Outer Space, with the cemetery, with the tombstones in the cemetery having some kind of significance. So
yeah, they're in the same vein as the documentary Room 237, where it has all these crazy, insane theories about what was included in The Shining by Stanley Kubrick, and they're all pretty outrageous and pretty stupid in my opinion. But it sounds like where they're looking and they're trying to find connections, and there probably isn't.
I mean, when you get into something like, a Stanley Kubrick film, I mean, he took and his team took a huge amount of time to make these movies. He did put a lot of thought and process into like how he did things, maybe more to disorientate the viewer than anything else, so that he achieved a kind of a certain kind of style, a certain kind of feel. Also with the the stories, the true stories, that certain scenes like in The Shining took 40 some odd takes, where he just kept having the actors do it over and over again. There's a there's a method to that, and it's all about getting a certain kind of performance that he feels is natural. And maybe by the 30th take, the actors are relaxing, or they're letting their guard down, or they're just trying to get it done. So he gets a more honest, performance out of them. There's a lot to be said about that, good and bad. So you can see where that kind of stuff comes out. These people assigning very specific things to his films. But for something like George Romero's films, he already had a framework, and we know that he was a good writer, a great editor, a great filmmaker, very hands-on approach. But a lot of the context was just getting the film done, just getting the shots done, so that he had something to work with, so he could. Especially Night of the Living Dead, but all of his other films as well. And it's certainly something like Dawn of the Dead, where a lot of it, is obviously improvised based on the pretty cool location that they got, which was the Monroeville Mall, and him, George and the team, like Mike Gornick, being inspired by, this area or that area, and coming up with different scenes and so forth. Let me see like the Phantom guy who signed the bonnet, Tony Pacco's saying he was in Night of the Living Dead, but nobody knows who he is. Well, like I said, John Vulo has pretty much put to bed anybody. He's figuring out, who the police in the film were, and which ones actually show up in the film, as opposed to the ones that were there and didn't make it into the film, and even who all the dogs were. So at this point, we're not, we're not worried about people saying that they were in Night of the Living Dead,
right.
In any kind of funny way. But moving on. I did want to, one final thing about, the whole cemetery and Barbara location, Barbara and Johnny location. The one place that I've never found is that stretch of road that she runs down.
Well, yeah.
Now, I know you have a few, possibilities.
Right.
I wasn't sure from the video that you did with Sean Clark, Horrors, was it Horrors? What's the title? I'm sorry. Say it again.
Horrors Hallowed Grounds.
Right. So Sean Clark has a video series where he covers filming locations, Horrors Hallowed Grounds, and you were on a recent one with the Night of the Living Dead and Dawn of the Dead filming locations, especially the ones outside of the mall. I think you guys mostly did outside the mall. I don't think you covered the mall, correct?
No, we didn't cover the mall.
Yeah, for that one.
Night of the Living Dead, that video.
But some of the cool, like the rooftop of the 247.
Well, sure, we
had
pit.
That's cool.
Basement at 247. That's what we really wanted to see. And then while we were there, we figured out a way to get to the rooftop, which is in Dawn of the Dead.
But so you had two possible, I think it was two possible locations, correct, for the road that Barbara runs down.
Yeah, here's the thing. Yeah, I have only heard one thing out there as far as information on where it is. Years ago, somebody said that Bill Heinzman said it was on Ashtop Road.
Right.
And that's the only information I ever heard. So I had looked all over a couple times going out there before I ever did tours. And I sort of figured out this one spot that's on Ashtop that's across 68, the highway. So it would be the opposite direction of where the farmhouse property is and the Posse scene area. So you would go, instead of turning from 68, leaving Evans City and turning right to go down Ashtop, you would make a left. And then there's a flat area over there that sort of makes sense. And it has a curve at the top. And then looking at, historic aerials and things and trying to match up the space to what you see in the movie, it sort of makes sense, but maybe it's a little off. And then I looked around and I found another spot, and it's where somebody else had said it possibly is. And that's one street over from Ashtop. So imagine you're coming from Evans City and you're heading out towards Ashtop.
Well, let's first explain so everybody knows what we're talking about. 68 is also Evans City Road, right?
Right.
And so you drive out of the center of town.
Sure.
And you're on Route 68 and you make a left. And I'd say that's like maybe like a mile until you reach the bridge area, correct?
But it would be, when you're going up 68, it would be a right.
Right. Well, I'm talking about going towards the house, right? So yeah, so you're driving out of Evans City, the center of town. There's this road, Ashtop Road. It's now called Ashtop Road. I don't think it was called that in 67 when they filmed. You make a right, and you drive about a mile, and you cross that bridge where you see you're in the film. We're facing the opposite way. You would cross the bridge kind of like the way exactly like the way you see the canine units, the Jeep and the canine car, with the police dogs come driving up. Going further down that road after you cross over the bridge, that's where that runs alongside the farmhouse property.
Correct.
I always thought if you keep going, that's where they filmed Judy running up the road.
Aaron, it's all wooded and none of the match. They don't have a curve at the top, because when you see Judy running on the road, you can see behind her, way back, there's a curve, and it goes like behind her, it goes to the left. So you have to look for a straight road, and then to the left behind her. And
so now you're saying that is if you again, you're heading out of the center of town and you're on 68 and you get to Ashtop Road, but instead of turning right, which would be taking you towards the farmhouse, you're saying turn left.
Correct.
And how far do you go until you see that portion of road? Right there.
You come right into it pretty quick. You just have to turn you would make your left, and you go in around a curve, and that's the curve, and you go in, and it's a straight road with a curve at the top that goes left if you turn yourself around. I mean, it sort of makes sense, but then there's another spot where somebody pointed out that maybe it might be the same road. So before you get to Ashtop, you make your right, onto Ashtop from 68. There's a road before it, and it might be Brownsdale. Don't quote me. I forget the name. But it's the road immediately before Ashtop. So you make a right there. And then you go down a little bit, and you'll come to a sort of hilly part of road, and it curves down. It has a steep, decline, and then it comes to a curve that turns left. And some people say that's the spot, but
do you know where do you know in Evans City where the hotel would have been that they stayed in when they made Night of the Living Dead?
Near the corner of Mars Evans City Road and Evans City Road.
So it would have been the other direction. It would have been past the center of town.
Where I'm talking about for the second location?
No, I'm talking about we know that they stayed in a hotel that's no longer there in Evans City. Um,
I think that was in the center of town.
so that would have been in the center of town.
I think so.
It's like you just try to put together, like when you're driving, out of the center of town towards Ashstop, on your right side is the gas station, Burr's gas station, where Dick Heckard would have worked and where they saw the truck. So that he had a working truck that was similar to the one that they were going to blow up. So, just putting together things like that, like what was in the proximity. Why would they use a road outside of, my first guess would have been right alongside the farmhouse road. She was just running down that. But if circumstance put them somewhere else, somebody could have said, hey, this is like a good spot to shoot.
Right.
So I don't know. Well, there's, it's good to have a goal. So there's one that we need to nail down someday. When I met Judy O'Dead, that was one of the first things that I asked her. Do you remember where you were running? And she's like, no, I don't. I'm sorry, what was that?
In those situations, what I try to do is look at, current satellite maps and then historic aerials for, sort of, kind of close to the date, because they have a website called historicaerials.com, and you can see different dates and of what the sort of areas look like, and that helps a lot. It's just hard to tell which spot is really it.
Yeah. Well, that's a good one to work on. Now we have more people working on things. So, and maybe that's one that we need to go to an Evans City resident like Ella May and ask her, Ella May Smith, where was that? Because a lot of times without even asking questions, we're getting information that we never knew before, such as what we always assumed was the front porch of the farmhouse was actually a side porch, and the front porch of the farmhouse was covered over at 67.
Right.
So that farmhouse had 3 entrances, and it actually had a road that went around it.
Figuring that out.
What's that?
We can thank Daz for figuring that out.
Yeah. We always said that side of the farmhouse is pretty bizarre. You don't really see it very well, and there's a tree in the way. But it turns out we were just all sitting there one of the Living Dead weekends, and Ella May pointed to this big banner of the farmhouse that the Historical Society had put up, and she said, that's where the front door was. And we were like, wait, what? So you never know what you're going to get out of anybody, until you start asking questions, or sometimes just being in their vicinity. So about the Living Dead weekend, we promised that we're going to reveal some guests, but before we do that, what do you want to tell everybody about your work with the Living Dead weekend?
Well, I mean, if you are a fan of film locations and George Romero's film locations, especially from Dawn of the Dead or Night of the Living Dead, when we have our Living Dead weekend conventions in Monroeville or Evans City, because I host tours, and these are the only times that I host tours of these film locations. And you get to experience my expertise and this knowledge that I have up here. I've built it for years, and I take people and fans, specifically on tours. My tours are typically always over 3 hours, and I give you what you would want and expect from a tour. They're pretty cool. So if we have a Living Dead weekend convention, you should go and see some of these tours. And in case you haven't heard, the Monroeville Mall was recently sold to Walmart, and the future is uncertain when it comes to the mall. So after this year, I don't know if we'll be able to do tours of the mall anymore. Events, so we aren't doing tours up there. So the future is really, really uncertain at the moment. We don't know what's going to happen, but we have a show this June 6th through the 8th at the Monroeville Mall. We're doing a Land of the Dead reunion, a Day of the Dead reunion, and we're going to have some Dawn of the Dead guests sprinkled in. We're going to have Night of the Living Dead guests sprinkled in too. So everybody's represented, and it's going to be a good time. And if you ever wanted to tour these places, now is, even at all, you want a tour of the Dawn of the Dead Mall, Monroeville Mall, come out. And tonight, we're not going to just announce one for the show. We're going to announce two. I got two up my sleeve to give you. How about that?
So before we get to that, I mean, that is, before we get to who these two guest announcements will be, that is a big attraction to making the pilgrimage to the Living Dead weekend, is that it's actually held in a filming location, one of the many filming locations, that was used in a George Romero production, but an especially important one, which was the Monroeville Mall in Dawn of the Dead. I can't think of too many other convention events that are able to actually hold their, a themed event in one of the filming locations.
Right.
I would say
kind of different. Most conventions are at a hotel or a convention center. And if a convention had their show at a mall, people would think, what's that? That's crazy. But it works for us because it's the main filming location of Dawn of the Dead. And we have the show in that very mall. So it's a special thing, and it works for us. It might not work for other shows, but it works for us very well.
I mean, even if you don't go to every, facet of where a shot was, a particular scene was shot and so forth. I mean, just being in the mall is such a special thing for an event, right? It's just it just gives it like another dimension. And like I said, it's, it makes it worthwhile for people to make the pilgrimage. The only other American event that I could think is even close to it, I mean, I know they've done stuff like visiting locations like for the Halloween franchise, or they do, they do an event up in New Jersey here in northwestern New Jersey at the Friday the 13th camp, the actual camp where Friday the 13th was shot, the first film.
Yeah,
but
Costco.
Yeah, the only thing that I could think of though that is like this would be Blobfest, which is the last surviving location for that is the theater, and they actually do a run out of the theater. The crowd gets to run out of the theater, but to have a location or to have a full themed event right inside one of the locations is very rare. The one that I've always wanted to go to, I don't even know if they do it anymore, but there was a TV show called The Prisoner, also in, I guess, 66 or 67, shot in the UK. And they filmed in this strange little village, which they call the Village in the TV show. I think it's up in Ireland or off the coast of Ireland, but they actually have the events there. So that's very similar. And it was always something I wanted to do, but because it's on another continent and there's a big ocean, I never got to do it. So, Monroeville Mall is one that I could do.
Outside the mall where they filmed the scenes from Back to the Future where the car first does its first time travel trip. And that mall is still there, and they do events in the parking lot and all that.
Right. But again, big Hollywood, it's a lot different, big Hollywood production, and a lot of that was, sets and so forth. So in the off chance that they do have a real location that they use, it's cool that they get to do something like that, but not quite the same as the Living Dead weekend. So who are the two guests that we could announce that you're going to announce tonight?
I have two guests, and they're both from Living Dead. We have Barbara herself, Judy O'Day, and we have Johnny himself, Russ Striner. This will be the first time that they've ever been featured together at the Monroeville Mall event that we put together. So that's pretty cool having them both there in the Monroeville Mall for fans to meet and greet and take photos with and get autographs from.
So as you said, this is the first time, and Kyra's shown Karen Cooper has already been announced as well. This is the first time the Night of Living Dead guests are at the Monroeville Mall venue for the Living Dead weekend. Before it was usually up by either in Evans City or near Evans City in October, but this is the first time they're coming out in June. And besides Judy O'Day and Russ Striner, as I said, Kyra Schoen's already been announced. And that's as part of the iconic zombie lineup, right? We have, who else is coming as part of that?
We'll have the iconic face of Dawn of the Dead, Paul Musser. He's known as the plaid shirt zombie, but he's really the basis of the movie poster, you know? He's that iconic zombie. He's going to be there.
And then who else from the iconic zombies?
Oh, now you're throwing me for a curve there. I don't know.
Well, you said there's a Land of the Dead announcement. There was a Land of the Dead reunion announcement. Who's coming from that? That would be the iconic zombie face of that movie.
Yeah, we've announced Big Daddy. You know, Eugene Clark played him in Land of the Dead. He's the iconic main zombie of Land of the Dead. And then if you want to get, you know, into Day of the Dead, which we're doing a reunion for, the main zombie is Bub, played by Howard Sherman. He's going to be at the show. So we've got the face of all these movies. It's going to be a great event. Everybody should come out, do a tour, meet these people. It's a good time.
So the Day of the Dead reunion, Land of the Dead reunion, now a Night of the Living Dead reunion in the making, and we've got the iconic zombies. So you can get all the information there, thelivingdeadweekend.com.
Yes, sir.
Hopefully you'll be doing your tours in some capacity. Like you said, is usually 3 hours. You can tell, the rest of us can tell when all of a sudden it's like, where is everybody? Oh, well, they must be with Larry, like on the escalator somewhere, walking on the roof. So, but yeah, usually there's like a big hole at certain parts of the day where it's like just people disappear all of a sudden. And then we see that group come shambling down the mall way, led by you. So hopefully you guys get to do, you know, all the kind of cool hidden locations that people wouldn't normally see going into the, you know, just visiting the mall as usual. But again, it's a great event, and it's a great location to have a George Romero themed event at one of his filming locations.
It really is.
So,
a place for it.
So yeah, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
We have to.
Finally,
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we have to do it again. We could. There's a lot of other things I know we could talk about, but like I said, want more information about Night of the Living Dead from Criterion. You can find it on Criterion.com. That's the actual link, but you know, just go to Criterion.com. You could search for Night of the Living Dead, and then there's the Godzilla film that's coming out.
Jim, but one more thing before we go. I want
Sure.
that you personally are the best thing that's ever happened in Night of Living Dead. It needs a person like you who will go after the people trying to violate their copyrights. You know, you need to, without you, they aren't making as much money. Let's face it, people need to make money in life. And these people who created this iconic film should make some money when they've been, you know, maybe slighted over the years when it comes to money. And you are such an important part of, you know, making sure that people in this company make some money off of their product, which they worked so hard on all those years ago. So thank you for your job in working together with Image 10, being a part of Image 10, and helping them, you know, make a little something off their hard work. They deserve it. This is a great film, and they deserve every bit that they can get out of it. Not to sound so crass as, talk money and business, but they deserve it.
Well, absolutely. I appreciate that. I appreciate that you think, highly of that, or, protecting the property like we all want to do. Look, for the most part, it's not, it's certainly not a fun job. I don't relish, having to, come down hard on people. But most people don't mean anything by it. They've been told the same thing over the years, which is it's public domain. You could do whatever you want, and everybody just tends to err on that side. There's very few people that are malicious about it. And, when you, hopefully, in a nice way, at least approach everybody that they, hey, you maybe don't have the right information about this, but Night of the Living Dead does have some rights protecting it. And, what you're doing is, falls outside of that, falls outside of fair use or falls outside of public domain. And, most people say, oh, I'm sorry about that. And, we're able to fix the situation without it becoming a big deal. So, it's at this point, it's really just educating everybody, because it is a very complex legal situation that doesn't have an easy answer. It isn't that the movie fell into public domain and that's the end of that. There's all these other rights involved, and they just were never acted upon for years, right. For decades, but now they are being utilized and acted upon. And it's for the good of the people that made the film, as well as the people that own the film. And in some cases, those are the same people. So, some of the shareholders are actors. Some of the Image 10 shareholders are the actors that you see in the film. Others, who aren't shareholders, well, their image and likeness is what has propelled the film all these years, and becomes kind of like a beloved, recognized part of the property. So, it's really hard to remove Dwayne Jones, for example, from his role in Night of the Living Dead. The two are kind of one and the same. And even though he's been deceased for some 40 years now, he's, his estate still has rights. So, to the man's likeness and to his, his personality that, was built up around this film. So, we just ask that people respect that. And, you could always find out more about it on image-10.com, the Image 10 website. So, that's a great resource that tells you, everything you need to know in this area, if you're interested to find out about it. I'm trying to see if I have there we go. So image-10.com, which is administered by our colleague Daz. He does a great job, and there's a lot of great information, especially the actor reveals that John Vulo and Daz have been working on together, and every week there's a new reveal of somebody that worked on the film that we may not have heard of before, or not even been able to place a name to the face. So, and there's going to be some interesting ones coming up in the future, which I'm sure you personally, Larry, are going to want to know about. So, because it's a few people that you've asked about in the past. So,
out there, and I really value John Vulo's, his work that he's done the past few years. He's a valued member of, the people and the team that works on things concerning Night of the Living Dead. He's doing a great job, an amazing job. I really, really love what he's doing.
It's great. We have a good team of people, of all of us, everybody contributing in their own way. and just getting the information and the facts straight, which is great. So good to see you. Good to see everybody that was here. We weren't able to get to a lot of comments. I see that, I'll read a bunch of these later. Somebody was asking, have they announced the movie for Friday night yet?
No,
I
everybody
guess not.
patient. In due time, be revealed.
Wayne is asking if Asia Argento or Jennifer Baxter are coming. That's
Those
way outside of.
great additions, but you're just gonna have to wait and see.
Yeah, that's way outside of my pay grade. So anyway, cool. Good to see you, Larry.
All right,
I'll
good.
be seeing you at the Living Dead weekend as well, and we'll probably talk before then. And again, whenever you want to come back on, the door is open. So come back on.
So
All right.
Good night from Night of the Living Dead.
And we'll see everybody again in a few weeks. Take care.
Good night.